Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Idea Talks. I'm pleased to introduce Yusuf Dahl, Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Lafayette College.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Excited to be here and certainly welcome any feedback to the conversation and talk today. My information is listed in the Exchange directory, and I look forward to hearing from as many of you that's interested in following up. So early in my career, I worked as a software developer for a company called Reader's Digest, which was a global publisher and really a household name. In the United States, RD had the largest subscription base of any magazine with the exception of the TV Guide. I might be dating myself with the TV Guide, but certainly that was like a must-read publication in our house. It was a profitable and well-regarded company. I still fondly recall the lavish holiday parties we used to have, replete with live jazz bands and the finest catered food. But it was a single platform and high margin business that struggled to adapt to a rapidly changing competitive landscape. And I've been thinking a lot about RD lately, and not just because I'm tired of Zoom get-togethers and I'm pining for in-person parties, but because competitive pressures and exogenous headwinds has made innovation one of the most frequently used words in my administrative meetings. I mean, who would have thought that you would hear things like we need to identify revenue generating opportunities that align with our brand value come from the mouths of academic officers? It reminds me of Reader's Digest because our executives fresh off of a leadership retreat would spout similar directives. And in hindsight, what's so astonishing to me is that organization thought industry changing or even company saving initiatives would emerge from sequestering a group of homogenous, mostly white male executives for a weekend brainstorming retreat. Now, I've been separated from RD for some time, but I do hope after two bankruptcies, they've changed their approach to driving innovation. I see a similar dynamic at work in higher education, which shouldn't be too surprising given the hierarchical nature of most institutions. However, I'm here today to offer an alternative approach, not only to identifying these revenue opportunities, but for generating meaningful innovations to our core missions as educational institutions. The title of my talk is Implementing the 20% Rule in Higher Education. And for those who aren't familiar with it, innovative companies have long allowed employees to allocate a percentage of their time to projects they are intrinsically interested in. Believing that this focused free thinking fosters a culture of innovation, companies ranging from 3M to Google have adopted it, and well-known products such as Gmail and Post-it notes have emerged from it. The amount of time allocated is really less important than what it signals about the culture of an organization. 3M aimed for 15% and W.L. Gore's target was 10, but all understood that affording those intrinsically interested time to reflect, ideate, and experiment could lead to important value creation initiatives. So what does this have to do with higher education, and what would it look like considering our business model is really so different from the companies I just mentioned? Innovation is no longer just a buzzword bandied about in entrepreneurship centers, and recriminations about the corporatization of colleges will not change the systemic pressures facing our business model. Most schools have or will soon be forced to reimagine their approach to helping students discover and develop their talents to have a positive impact in the world. It's really no longer a question of if we should innovate, but rather how. Will we do it from the top down, characterized by internecine departmental battles over resources and preserving the status quo? Or will we adopt an inclusive approach, led by a diverse group of stakeholders that starts with the student and works backwards? The challenges facing our industry are daunting. Unfavorable demographics increased competition, decreased funding are just a few of the headwinds staring us down. On top of that, higher ed institutions have been built around specialists, academically and administratively, when the pace of the world today requires versalists. People who can apply a depth of knowledge to a widening scope of situations. People who inherently think integratively and are predisposed to connecting the dots. As an entrepreneurship director who thinks broadly about his work, I've experienced this tension firsthand. I've been called out on social media about my work in the community and chided about experimenting in areas that don't fit within the narrow definition of entrepreneurship. It's as if I have violated some clear yet unwritten rule to stay in my lane, but to create value for my institution, for my students, and for my community requires me to do so. Being able to allocate a part of my time has given me the freedom to pursue projects I'm intrinsically interested in. And in 2020, I founded the Real Estate Lab in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a social enterprise dedicated to helping those historically excluded become real estate entrepreneurs. In my past experience as an affordable housing developer, I became intimately aware of the barriers that prevent more brown and black folks from participating in the greatest wealth generator in this country. So I started a program that provides the knowledge, networks, and capital to help folks get started. Recognizing an alignment between my aspirations and the commitment my college made to our home community, I began to share my idea with others and convince them to contribute their expertise and talent to the initiative. Today, we have a dedicated space in downtown Allentown and have raised $1 million to help our participants get started with their real estate ventures. Now, what are some of the challenges to implementing this approach in higher education? Implementing some type of 20% rule really requires more than just finding a sympathetic boss who's willing to give it a shot. It takes changing a culture that at its core is hierarchical, risk adverse, and output rather than outcome oriented. Effective innovation is interdisciplinary, and it challenges the silos that are the bedrock of most institutions. How many times have you been told to stay away from some promising initiative because such and such owns it and you don't want to upset them? I can't tell you how many third rails I've been advised to avoid since I've been in higher education. If we want the intrinsically interested to experiment and challenge conventions, then we have to develop a mechanism to remove obstructionists, or at a minimum, a requirement to put some insulation on these third rails so we don't lose our minds or hands as we experiment. Innovation requires bandwidth, which is probably the biggest challenge to something like this. All of us are doing more with less and are incredibly busy, but organizations that will thrive in the future will be the ones that harness the power and creativity from the intrinsically interested, not stifle them. Innovation is also risky. Failures are going to happen, and we need to be okay with that. We need to normalize shutting down programs that don't work and disabuse ourselves of the notion that every legacy program must be continued. Experimenting, testing assumptions, and changing directions is how true progress is made, not endless debate or waiting for a peer institution to do it first. Whether we like it or not, significant changes are coming to higher education, and effectively navigating them requires the contributions of as many of our colleagues as possible. Implementing some type of 20% rule expands the pipeline of innovations and innovators that can help drive your institution into the future. Thank you. Happy to comments, questions, would love to hear with if anything like this is happening at other centers, talk more about my work in Allentown. I think we have a couple of minutes. or happy to let everyone get some of that time back and pursue their own intrinsically interested projects, whatever works best. What do you think, Abby?
I think you'll be hearing from some folks over the course of the week, and I wouldn't be surprised if you get some questions and some ideas related to your talk.
Absolutely. So my information is in the directory. So if folks think of something, please reach out to me. Would love to, chat and understand maybe some of the barriers at your institutions, or talk about how this is actually materialized at my own institution.
Oh, some questions just popped up. I'll head out and let you answer these, Yusuf. See ya.
Okay, so where do I chat here? How would you frame this as an employee to a boss? So first of all, you have to have a boss who really understands the challenge that our business, our industry is facing. And I think if you have that type of leadership, they truly understand that the only way forward is through creativity. Like I mentioned, my boss, so I report to the provost. You would not call him an entrepreneur, but literally he is asking these questions that I mentioned, right? How do we identify opportunities that align with our brand value? And so if that's a value that the organization believes in, then empowering your employees is kind of a natural next step, because all the answers can't come from the top down. This is what I saw at Reader's Digest, which, the fact that probably a lot of you haven't heard about that company should tell you something. It was truly like a global brand at one point. And all the answers can't come from the presidential cabinets of our respective institutions. That's where I would start with it. Am I finding that the intrinsically interested are students, faculty, staff, or other groups? I would say all the above. I think, there's a handful of people in all of these different groups. And I think the success of one of those individuals, so the work that I've done, for instance, has empowered other people at the college to be able to drive work that they're really passionate about. I think the problem is, in a previous version of my talk, I had a joke that, my boss will let me do anything as long as it's on top of the, 60 hours I already give to the organization, right? And so that's not a sustainable model. And so it's really about institutions empowering their people, but also, again, giving them time and space to reflect, ideate, experiment. And I think, again, that time is the biggest challenge. And I think, let's see. Yeah, the real estate lab, Allentown would love to check it out. Check out the website. It's a public-private partnership. And we just, like I said, have invested. So we raised $1 million. We've invested $600,000 at this point. But what's really kind of powerful about the model is there's a built-in mechanism to recycle that capital. So we typically will give low to no interest loans to participants, help provide that bridge until they can take us out with traditional finance. How to convince bosses? Listen, if folks do not see the problem, what's fascinating is when I talk to people who ostensibly we're all looking at the same set of challenges, structural challenges facing our industry. And I'll talk to a group of people who will think everything is fine. Like an ostrich, all we need to do is put our head in the sand and things will get better. With those types of folks, I'm not sure. And I think our session is over. What would be the first step in making a change at a college? I think the first step is making sure there's an alignment. right? If you're at an institution that is so rigid, and if there's not leadership at the highest level that respects the creativity of the individual employee to contribute, I don't know how you get around this. But I would say if it's in the mission statement, because I think the challenge is every institution has some lofty mission statement that in theory should support this type of employee empowerment and engagement. And so I think tying back this type of initiative to ostensibly what's the institution's mission should help engage some of these conversations. And again, the other thing is, obviously, when I talk about the work of the intrinsically interested, it really needs to align with the vision of the institution, right? So the work that I've done in Allentown, I was able to align that with the commitment my college has made to our home community. And so, shutting something like that down really contradicts what we say we're all about. And so that's how I was able to do it. So I think definitely finding that alignment is critical. What suggestions might you have to communicate strategic visions to people? Yeah, I hear you, Jennifer. I'm probably not the best person. I get really frustrated very quickly, and I'll tell you the approach that we've taken here, which has earned the respect of some, but the enmity of others, is, we're asking for forgiveness, not permission. And of course, right, you need to be thoughtful as you engage in that type of strategy. But honestly, at some point, you just got to take action, iterate, and hopefully get some small wins. And folks start to see the value of what you're proposing and can hopefully get behind it. You ran an innovation center in Arizona. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, WL Gore, it's interesting if you look at these companies that are truly, ahead of the curve and putting out projects or products and services that are making folks' lives better. These ideas, it isn't the result of some structured process, right? It's really about hiring smart people. And maybe you've heard of this expression, right? I hire smart people and get the hell out the way. Like this is kind of along those same lines. But if the organization was to say, you can spend 10% of your time on projects you're truly passionate about that align with the vision of our institution, then I think you start to operationalize that value or that thinking in a certain way. And again, as I said in the talk, right, the amount of time is really less important than the value, or the signal that it sends about the values of your culture. And yeah, I mean, it really, really does start with leadership and making sure folks have that mindset, right? And share our vision as being change makers and, folks who take action and are not so enthralled with the status quo. Everyone at this conference, which is why it's so great to be here, when we hear things are done a certain way because it's the way they've always been done, we instinctively are like, okay, well, that can probably be changed and improved. But you'll be shocked. Well, you probably won't be shocked, but it's shocking to me how many people are comforted by that response. And so that's a real challenge that we face. Yeah, Jennifer, I agree. We do need a support group. The work is important. And I would just say, I've been joining a lot of the presentations today, and it's really been inspired by the work of that's going on across the country, across the world, as part of this organization, really just more broader as part of the mission and kind of that shared ethos that we all share. So I would love to connect with anyone. My information's in the exchange, but just keep up the good fight. And, ultimately, I think, that will prove itself out. So thank you so much for giving me your time. I know you had other places to be, so thank you, and look forward to connecting with as many of you as possible.